In this video, I will show you how to perform CRUD operations using Node JS and MySQL Database. So first, it is necessary to install Node JS, and to check if it is installed or not, we can open the command prompt or the terminal, and here we can type node --version. So here we can see that it is installed correctly, and this is the version that I have. So if you don't have Node, then it is necessary to install it. So we can type Node or Node.js, then we need to go to the first link. Then we can either download the recommended version or the latest version. So in my case, I downloaded and installed this version. Then we need MySQL. So we can either download and install MySQL alone, or also we can download and install XAMPP, which already includes MySQL. So in my case, I will use XAMPP, and we can see that it has MySQL. So with XAMPP, we can see the data of our database using phpMyAdmin. So here we can click on admin, and here we have phpMyAdmin. So these are the available databases, and we need to create a new database. So let's click on new, and let's create a new database called StoreDB. Then create. So this database has been created. Let's click on it, and for the moment we don't have any table, so we can create a new table using an SQL query. So let's click on SQL. Then here let's write the SQL queries that allows us to create a new table and to fill it with some data. So this is the first query. It allows us to create a database table called products. So we need the product ID, which is the primary key, and it is auto-incremental. Then we have the product name, the brand, the category, we have the price, the description, and also the date. So for the date, the default value will be the current date. Then this is the second query, so it allows us to insert some products into the products table. Now let's execute these two queries, so let's click on Go. And here we can see that the table has been created, and also we inserted 10 rows. Now let's click on the name of the table, which is products. And here we can see that we have these rows. Also we can take a look at the structure of this table. So let's click on structure. So here we can see that the ID is the primary key and it is auto-incremental. Now let's create a new Node.js application. So using VS Code, let's create a new folder. So I will create a new folder under Documents. First, let's create a new folder called Node Projects. Then let's create our new application. We can call it Store API. Then let's create a new JavaScript file. Let's call it server.js. So for the moment we can print some text on the console, so let's write console.log. Let's save the file, and to run it we need to open the terminal. Then here we have to type node, then the file name. So let's write node, then server.js. And here we have the output of this file. Now we need to install some packages. But first let's create the file called package.json that allows us to manage the different packages. To create it we can type npm, then init, then -y. So now we have this new file. So this file is optional, but it is practical to list the different dependencies that we will install. So we can close it. And now we need to install some packages. So we have to type npm, then I like install, and the first package that we need is express.js. So let's type express. Also we need MySQL too. Let's press enter. So now the dependencies are installed correctly, and we can see that we have this new folder that contains all the dependencies of our application. Also, we can take a look on the file package.json, and here we can see that we have these two dependencies. Now we can delete this statement, and let's import express. So here we need to call require express, then we need to create our application. So here we can define the port number, so I will use this port number. Then we need to add the body parser that allows us to read the received data. So this statement is very important. It allows us to add the express body parser, which is a JSON parser, to our express application. Then let's create our first route. So we have to call app.get, which means that this route will process the requests that are received using the HTTP GET method, and the URL will be /API/products. Of course, we can change this URL. For example, we can delete /API. But because we are creating an API, it is practical to start with /API. So this is the URL, and this is the function that will be executed when we send a request to this URL using the HTTP GET method. So when we send a request using the HTTP GET method to this URL, we will execute this function that will return a success response, which means a code 200, and also it will send a JSON data, which is list of products. So this route should allow us to read all the available products, and to read the details of only one product, we need to create another route. So we can copy this. Let's paste it here. And to read the product by ID, we have to add the product ID to the URL. So let's add /, then colon, and the name of the parameter. We can call it ID. Then let's read the product ID in this arrow function. So let's create a variable. We can call it ID. And it is equal to request.params.the name of the parameter. So we can return a success message. We can update this a little bit. So we can write product ID is equal to the product ID that we have in the URL. Then let's create another route that allows us to create new products. So we can copy all of this. Let's paste it here. This route will be accessible using the HTTP post method. So we don't need the product ID in the URL. We can delete it. We can delete it from here as well. Then let's read the product details from the request body. So let's create a variable. We can call it product, and it is equal to our request.body. So we can read the submitted data from the request body because we already included the body parser. If we don't add this statement, then this statement will never work. So we will return a success response that contains the submitted product details. So we can delete all of this and let's replace it with product. Then let's create another route that allows us to update the product details. So we can copy this. Let's paste it here. So this route will be accessible using the HTTP put method. It will be accessible at this URL, but also we need the product ID. So let's add /, then the name of the parameter, we can call it ID. So we need to read the product ID, so we can copy this. Let's paste it here. Then let's add the product ID to this object that we will return to the user. So here we can write product.id is equal to the product ID. And of course, we will send a success response that contains this product. And finally, let's create another endpoint that allows us to delete products. So we can copy this. Let's paste it here. So it will be accessible using the HTTP delete method. So this is the URL. And of course, we need the product ID. So we don't need this anymore. Let's delete it. So we will read the product ID. Let's delete this. And let's return a success response that contains a text. So we can write delete product with ID, and this is the product ID. Now let's start the server. So here we can call app, which is our express application.listen. This is the port number that we defined just here. And when we start the server, we will display this text on the console. Let's save the file and let's run the application. So here we can see that the server is listening on the port number 4000, which is this message. So now let's test the different endpoints using Postman. So let's open a new tab. We will send a request using the HTTP GET method. So the URL will be the URL of our server, which is localhost. So it is localhost colon the port number. Then the endpoint is available at the URL /API/products. Then let's click on send. So here we have list of products, which is the response of the first endpoint. So here we have list of products. Now let's test this route. So we have just to add the product ID to the URL. So let's add the ID 2, for example. And here we have product ID is equal to 2, which is this response. Then let's test the post method. So we have to send a request to this endpoint using the HTTP post method. So we can open a new tab. Let's select the post method. So we can select this URL, localhost colon 4000 /API/products, and we need to send some data to the server. So we have to go to body, then row, then we will send a JSON object. So here let's select JSON, and let's provide an object with some properties. So let's write the name. Then we have the brand, the category, the price, and the description. Let's send the request. And here we have the response. So the response will be the same data that we submitted to the server. So here we can see that when we send a post request, the response will be the same product that we submitted. Now let's test the put method. So we can copy this object. Let's open a new tab. So the method will be the put method that allows us to update the product. And of course we have to add the product ID to the URL. So let's suppose that we will update the product with the ID 4. Then we need to send the new product details. So let's select body, then row, then JSON, and let's paste the JSON object just here. Let's send the request. So here we can see that we have the submitted product plus the product ID. Now let's test the delete method. So let's select delete. And let's suppose that we want to delete the product with the ID 4. And here we have delete product with ID 4, which is the response of this route. Now let's read and write the products in the database. So first we have to import the MySQL 2 package. We can add the following statement just here. So we can create a variable called MySQL, and it is equal to require MySQL 2, which is the package that we already installed. Then let's create the connection pool that allows us to connect to the database. So we can create it just here. So this pool is equal to MySQL, which is this variable dot create pool. Here we have an object that allows us to connect to the database. So we need the host name, which is localhost. We need the username, which is root. I don't have any password, and this is the name of the database. So here we have to add .promise in order to add the promise wrapper that allows us to use the await keyword. Now let's update this endpoint. So we can delete this. And let's replace it with try catch. So if we have any exception, then we will return an internal server error, which is the code 500. So here we will return a JSON object that contains the error description. And in the try block, we will execute pool.execute. So pool that we have here is this pool.execute, and we will select everything from the products table. So the result will be stored into this object, and then we will return a success response that contains the list of products. So this object is an array of two elements. The first element is the list of products. But here we can see that we have this error with await. This is because we cannot use await if the function is not asynchronous. So to fix this, we have just here to add async to this arrow function. Now let's save the file. And of course we have to restart the application. So let's stop it and let's run it again. Now let's read the list of products using Postman. So we will send a GET request. And here we can see that we have a list of objects. So every object corresponds to one product from the database. And you can see that we have 10 products, which are the products that we added into the database table. Now instead of reading all the products, let's read a product by ID. So we need to update this route. So let's delete this statement. Let's add the try catch block. So in the catch block, we will return internal server error, which is the code 500. And in the try, we need to execute the SQL query that allows us to read the product by ID. So we need to call pool.execute. The first parameter will be the SQL query. So here we have select everything from the products table where the product ID is equal to question mark. Then we need to replace question mark with this ID. So we have to add a second parameter, which is an array. And the different elements of this array will replace the different question marks of this SQL query. So we need to add only one element, which is this ID. Of course, we have this error, so let's add async just here. Then let's read the result. So we can create another variable. Let's call it rows. And it is equal to the first element of the data array that we have just here. So you have to write data of 0. So rows are the different products of this SQL query, but in our case we will have at most only one product. So we need to check if we have one product or not. So if rows.length is equal to 0, this means that we did not find a product with this ID. In this case, we can return not found. So not found means the code 404. So it is an empty response. Otherwise, if we found a product with this ID, then we can return a success response with a JSON object, which is the product that we found. So here we have to write rows of 0. Now let's save the file and let's restart the server. So instead of restarting the server each time we update the source code, we can restart the server automatically after every modification. To do this, we have just to add the watch parameter to the command. So we have to write node, then -- watch, then the file name. So here we can see that the watch mode is an experimental feature and it may change in the future. Now let's test our application. So here let's read the product with the ID 5, for example. So here we can see that we have a success response and we have only one object, which is the product with the ID 5. So let's provide an ID that does not exist in the database, 50 for example, and this time we have not found. Now I will show you how to create products. So we need to update the route that is accessible using the post method. So this route should allow us to create new products. But first we need to validate the submitted data. So just here let's create a new function. We can call it isValidProduct and it receives the product that we want to validate. So let's create two variables inside this function. The first variable will be a boolean that allows us to know whether we have errors or not, and the second variable will be an object that will contain the validation errors. So first let's suppose that the product name is required. So we need to check if we have the product name into this object or not. So if we don't have the product name, then we can add an error to the errors object, which is equal to the name is required. And we can set has errors boolean to true. Then let's do the same thing with the other properties that are required. So we can copy this. Here we will check the brand. Then also let's check the category. Then let's check the price. So for the price, it should be defined and also it should be a number. If it is not a number, then we can display this error message, which is the price is not valid. Then let's check if we have the product description or not. If we don't have the product description, then we can display the text, the description is required. Then this function will return an object that contains has errors and errors. So just here let's add return. We will return an object that contains has errors and errors. Now let's update the route that allows us to create new products. So let's delete this statement. Let's add the try catch block. So if we have any exception, then we can return internal server error with the error message. And in the try, we need first to validate the received data. So we can call isValidProduct. This is our product that we received. So let's check if we have errors or not. So if we have any validation error, then we will return a bad request. And here we have the validation errors. Of course, we have to exit the method if we have validation errors. Otherwise, we need to insert the new product into the database. So first, let's read the current date. So we can create a new variable called created@. Then let's create the SQL query. So this is the SQL query. It is insert into the products table. We will insert the name, brand, category, the price, the description, the date, and the values will be these question marks. So here we can see that we have 6 question marks and we have to replace them with the corresponding values. So we need to create an array that contains the data and the elements that will replace these question marks. So the first question mark will be replaced by product.name. The second one will be product.brand. Then we have product.category, then the price, then the description, and finally the date. So product that we have here is the data that we received from the client. Then we need to call pool.execute. This is the SQL query and this is the array that we have just here. Of course, we have this error, so let's fix it. Just here, let's add async. So this query allows us to create a new product, but we need also to send the new product to the client. So we need to read the ID of the product that has been created from this array. So we can create a variable called ID Then here we have data of 0.insert ID. So insert ID is the ID of the product that has been created. Then we need to read the data of the created product from the database. So we have to create a new SQL query and we need to execute it. So we can call pool.execute. Then here we have the SQL query, select everything from products where ID is equal to this product ID. Now let's save the file. Of course, the application will restart because we are using the watch command. Then let's create a new product. So we can send an empty object to see the validation error. So let's delete all of this and let's send the request. So here we have the validation errors and we have a bad request. The name is required, the brand is required, category is required, the price is not valid, and the description is required. Now let's provide a bad price. For example, let's write test, which is not a number. So this time we have only one validation error regarding the price. Let's provide a correct price. Then let's send the request. So here we can see that we have a success response, and this is the product that has been inserted. So this product has the ID 11. So just here let's type 11. And this is the product that we have just created. Now let's update the route that allows us to update the products. So just here we can delete these two statements. Let's add the try catch block. So in the try block we have to validate the received data, so we can use our validation function. So if we have any validation error, then we will return a bad request. Then we need to update the product in the database. So we need to create the SQL query and we need to execute it. So the SQL query will update the products table and it will set the product name, the brand, category, the price, the description, where the product ID is equal to the product ID that we received. And here we have the values. So because we have 6 question marks, we can see that we have an array that contains 6 elements. And here we have the product ID that will replace this question mark. Then we will call pool.execute. This is the SQL query and this is the array. We have this error, we can fix it. So just here let's add async. Now the error is fixed. So now let's see if we really updated a product in the database or not. Because the ID that we received, it is possible that it does not belong to any available product. So we need to check if we really updated a product or not. So if data of 0.affected rows, so data is this variable, is equal to 0, this means that we did not find a product with this ID in the database. In this case, we can return not found. And of course, we have to exit this function. Otherwise, we have to read the data of the updated product and we can return a success response with the updated product. So we will select all the columns from the products table where the product ID is equal to this ID. And then we will return a success response with the product that we updated. Let's save the file. Let's update the product with the ID 11, so we can copy these properties. So here we will update the product with the ID 11. So here let's write 11. Of course, we will send a request using the put method. We can delete all of these properties and let's paste these properties. Of course, we have to delete this comma. So we can update the name and also let's update the price. And in the description, we can add the year, for example. Let's send the request. So here we can see that we have a success response. And this is the new product. So we updated the name and the price and also the description. We can check this just here. And also we can see that the data and the product has been updated. And if we try to update a product that does not exist in the database, for example, the product with the ID 20, this time we have not found, so we don't have a product with the ID 20 in the database. Now I will show you how to delete products. So we need to update this route, the delete route. We can delete this statement. Let's add the try-catch block. In the try, we have to execute the SQL query that allows us to delete the product. So we have to call delete from products, where ID is equal to this question mark that will be replaced by the product ID that we have just here. We have this error, so let's add async just here. Then let's check if we really deleted a product with this ID or not. So if data of 0.affected_rows is equal to 0, this means that we did not find any product that we have deleted. In this case, we can return not found. Of course, we have to exit this method. Otherwise, we can return a success response with no data. Let's save the file. Then let's go to the delete tab. So here we will send a delete request. We can delete the product with the ID 11. So the first time I send the request, we can see that we have a success response because we had a product with the ID 11. And if we send the request again, this time we have not found because we already deleted this product.